You all know the old adage, the apple does not fall far from the tree. Well, I've always been told that I am just like my mom.
And you should be flattered, my darling.
Well, I don't think I am just like you, but we do have lots of things in common. We are both the oldest of our siblings.
Yes, that could be a blessing or a curse.
I've always felt very protective of my younger siblings, but I was not exactly a responsible older sibling at all times. More of a bossy wild woman.
You have always liked being in charge, though.
As have you. And we both like volunteering, reading, and nice handbags.
And we have each married older men.
Yes, that was something we seemingly had in common. I married Mike when I was 33, and he was 47.
Henry thought you marrying an older man would give you someone who could stand their ground with you. Personally, I never thought that man existed.
To be clear, Henry was Mom's third husband. Mom and Henry had each been married twice before, so quite literally, the third time was the charm for both of them.
Henry and I were together for over 20 years. I liked being married to Henry. I truly enjoyed spending time with him. He was funny, generous, and caring. With a 16-year age difference, I knew that aging was part of the deal. I just didn't expect it to rob us of so much of our life together while he was still living. When he started getting sick, we slowed down. We went out less, we spent more time at home. Henry, being an only child, was used to getting his way, so when things didn't work for him, he didn't adapt. When his favorite pastimes of golf and fishing got difficult, Henry quit. Over time, I became the person in charge, and I turned into a full-time caregiver. My life got smaller. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and Henry reached a point where he didn't want to cope with it anymore. So one day, he climbed the stairs, he crawled into bed, and he stayed there for 18 months. On particularly bad days, I had a very special nursing catalog, more commonly recognized by all of you as the Bloomingdale's catalog. I kept it right by the phone for those special times I needed something, and I could order a lovely handbag or a gorgeous pair of nursing heels. It finally came time to add home health care to the mix. We were interviewed. I thought a lot about how Henry would deal with this, and I decided to use the fact that he absolutely adored his daughters, his stepdaughters, and his granddaughters. To our advantage, then young women could come into our home and help me, and I could go out. I could volunteer, I could run errands without having to hurry back, I could go to lunch, I could even take a bus trip or two, knowing that my husband was happy and safe at home, and it helped me return to being more of a wife and less of a caregiver. After more than 5 years of health issues, including the 18 months in bed, Henry died on Christmas Eve. I remember how oddly quiet the house seemed. I called the nurse. I told her I didn't really know what I was seeing, but I thought my husband had died. When it was over, there were feelings of sadness, but our last few months had been awful, and there were feelings of relief too, for both of us. People started showing up, absolutely wonderful people offering to help, but I didn't need anything. I launched into business mode, making arrangements. I was prepared. I had lists.
Mom, you were an amazing caregiver all those years. And when it was time to let him go, you were calm and organized. It was impressive.
Well, by that time, everything about Henry's death was expected.
Mike and I had been married 10 years, so I was used to the fact that he was an insomniac. On nights when he couldn't sleep, he would head downstairs to watch TV, and he'd end up falling asleep on the couch. One morning, I woke up, and it was past 5:30 a.m. He was normally gone by this time. I went downstairs to make sure he was awake. He appeared to still be asleep, but as I got closer, it was clear that something was not right. He had very obviously died at some point during the night. That was it. No illness, no warning, completely unexpected. Like Mom, I'm a planner, and I would have had a plan, but Mike didn't like to talk about the tough subjects like death. Suddenly, I was faced with running his business, telling his kids from his first marriage, and figuring out the plan for what to do with the guy that when once asked said, "Put me in a hefty bag and throw me in the dumpster at the dealership." There was no time to mourn. I had to jump right in.
During Henry's long illness, I had been told about the 5 stages of grief. I watched Jen in the aftermath of losing Mike and wondered how they would hit her. For as much as I loved having so much in common with my oldest daughter, this was one thing I wish she didn't have to go through. The first stage is denial. I went through the denial process long before Henry was gone. I kept hoping after his first strokes that he would come back. But when his health plateaued, that hope dissolved.
I immediately launched into denial. I could not believe that I had to tell his children that their dad had suddenly died. It had been only 18 months since they had lost their mother after a long bout with cancer.
The next stage is anger. When Henry climbed those stairs, he was done living. And in essence, our life was over. I was angry for the choice he had made for us. I really enjoyed this man and the life we had built. I thought we had a few good years left, and I was angry that he had decided to quit trying.
The anger part came pretty easily for me, and I was not afraid to admit that I was pissed off. I'd been left with no plan. The auto dealership he owned was not doing well, and there was no succession plan. When he got back from the crematorium, I put him on the mantle. That way I could see him from most locations downstairs. This way, I had several vantage points for yelling at him. When I didn't need to yell at him, he could still sit there and see the TV from where he now sat.
The next step is bargaining. I had to remind myself that when I married an older man, I knew there were risks and complications. But I do have to be honest. After all we went through, even today, I find myself attracted to an older gentleman.
Bargaining was a mild and short-lived stage for me. I had no desire to switch places with him. I'm not one of those people that rends her garments and yells, "I wish it could have been me." After all, I'm pretty callous. And I was only 43 years old. I had a lot left to do. So no, I couldn't see any other bargaining chips. And looking back, if I'm totally honest, I don't even think I experienced this stage.
Next was depression. For me, it came when Henry was sick. I was sad for him. I was sad for myself. I loved to dance. Henry was very accommodating. But after his strokes and walking with a cane, dancing was something we never did again.
Depression came for me in waves and at odd times. I think it took me time to even process what was going on. I was more overwhelmed than depressed in the first weeks. The situation was overwhelming. Trying to plan his funeral was overwhelming, and my extended family started showing up en masse. That is overwhelming on a good day. Depression was always close, and odd things would trigger it. Cleaning out his office, the day Mom, my sister Kate, my niece Maggie, and my bestie Heather came over to clean out his clothes, When we got to the coat closet, for some reason, I lost it.
And lastly, there's acceptance. I reached this stage while Henry was still alive because I had to figure out a new normal for us so we could get a little enjoyment out of life. For a while he was still mobile, we could go to social events. He would go in, he would look around, find a table filled with people he thought were acceptable. He would sit and I would mingle.
Acceptance. To me, death is such a matter-of-fact thing. It was so unexpected, but it happened. And for Mike, who was a very private person, if it was his time to go, then this was the perfect scenario. On the couch, at home, alone, watching an episode of Andy Griffith for the 100th time. He would not have wanted it any other way.
We both went through the 5 stages of grief in our own way. I went through it all before Henry died. By that time, I was ready to move on. If I could go back, I would have offered Jen some guidance to take time to grieve. She seemed to jump through those 5 stages like they were 5 days of the week. Her family stepped in to help at home so she could take care of the business. We cleaned, we took calls, we answered the door for flower deliveries, visitors, and an abundance of food. We had so many people and so much food. It finally dawned on us, after cleaning the kitchen for about the 400th time, that we had a stack of dishes that didn't belong to us. They had no names, we had no idea what they were. So unbeknownst to Jen, we snuck those dishes out and stacked them on her front porch. That way we hoped at least people might come by and recognize what was theirs. Luckily, Jen did not notice.
Now, I don't even remember any of that stuff. I do know that my favorite meal was the Sunday bar from the Sydney Dairy Barn, and my home smelled like a funeral parlor. I do think it took me slightly longer than 5 days to get through the stages, but the point is, there should not be a time frame for anyone. Get through them when you get through them. However you feel is perfectly fine. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Through all of this, I learned to embrace change and the unexpected. I dated. It sucked. I swore off dating until one beautiful fall day when the person that would become my spouse was walking across lot 32 towards my tailgate party. You see, Mom was right. The man that can go toe-to-toe with me may not exist, but the woman that can most certainly does. 6 years ago, I was smart enough to ask her to marry me, and she was crazy enough to accept.